So what you're saying here is that God created this world and allowed the evil of this world and allows the suffering of this world and allows all the hardship of this world to prepare us for the next world where there is not going to be any suffering, any hardship, any tears. How does that ever make sense?
Yes. So allow me to elaborate, and I promise that although you may not agree or like it, it will make perfect sense. So I'm going to give you two reasons why. Number one, overcoming sin and death in this world ensures that we won't repeat it in heaven. So in the Christian worldview, this life is but a grain of sand in the ocean of eternity. We're not living this life as if this is all there is, because we believe that our actions determine where we will spend eternity. To my knowledge, your worldview doesn't currently affirm that belief. So think about this. Let me lay the foundation. If, when we die, there are no rewards or consequences for how we live, then why does it matter how we live? Think about it. If there is no God, no reward of heaven, no punishment of hell, then what incentive is there to live my life in any particular way while I'm here on earth? If there's no consequence, what's wrong with me stealing from others, taking advantage of weaker people, lying instead of telling the truth, and doing whatever I want when I want? What? Because I live in a world where some people say I shouldn't do those things? So what? Why should I care what you or anyone else thinks? If what I'm doing is not illegal, why should I care about your subjective standard of morality? In fact, if there is no God, who gets to determine what is right and wrong? Our government can't even agree right now on abortion, gun control, marriage, illegal immigration, or even practically any other issue. One person's standard of morality is no better than the next. So if there's no consequence or reward when we die, why should we care how anyone lives? But if there is an afterlife, if there is a heaven and hell, and the determination on where I spend eternity is determined by someone with an objective standard of morality, then how I live and how I treat people does matter. So if we live right and we make it to heaven, we will value spending eternity with God in a place without sin because we are aware of sin's effects and consequences. In heaven, there will still be free will. Well, how do I know this? Because free will is necessary for love. God is love and created mankind with the intrinsic ability to freely choose to love and obey him. The type of love that God and us desires is only possible when creatures are given free moral choices. In eternity, we will still have free will, but hell will serve as a reminder of the consequences of disobedience. When we get to heaven, we will still have free will, but not only will we no longer have an internal desire that desires to sin, but we will not want to sin because we have already learned the knowledge of good and evil here. Sin will be beneath us in eternity, and all those who have overcome sin and death in this life will not dare to risk it in the next life. Hell will be an internal reminder of the horror of rebellion, a lesson we will already have learned on earth. So once again, understanding what it took to overcome sin and evil in this life ensures that we won't risk eternity by choosing to exercise our free will to engage in sin and evil in the next life. Instead, we will choose to exercise our free will to freely love God for giving us the power to overcome sin and evil. Paul clearly understood this, and that's why he wrote in 2 Corinthians 4:16-18, "Therefore we do not give up. Because even though our outer person is being destroyed, our inner person is being renewed day by day. For our momentary light affliction is producing for us an absolutely incomparable, eternal weight of glory. So we don't focus on the things which are seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." Number two, knowing God often requires pain. God didn't just create us to love him, but to know him. There are elements of God's nature and character that we could not know without pain. How could we know that God is a healer if we never get sick? How could we know he's a deliverer if we never get in trouble? A comforter if we never experience adversity and grief? You don't appreciate the view at the top of the mountain if you never experience the lows of the valleys. In the natural, your muscles don't even grow unless you tear them down. A seed doesn't grow with just sunlight and water. It needs dirt. You seem to think that the best version of God's glory is shown by living in a world without sin and evil. I think that God's glory is best shown by us overcoming sin and evil in the world. The presence of sin and evil doesn't constitute an absence of God in the world, but an absence of God in our lives. It is precisely the enduring of suffering and difficulty now that enhances our capacity to know and enjoy God both now and in eternity. How would we appreciate an eternity without suffering, hardship, and tears if you never experienced them here on earth? We love Jesus because he is the only deity in the entire world who entered into the world he created and gave us the power to overcome the evil so we can live in a world without evil. Now, whether you like it or not, understand it or accept it or not, Jesus is the only deity who has a plan for the evil in the world. Well, what's Kemet's plan? What's the plan of all these African traditional religions? Jesus showed up, and there's historical evidence that proves that. Now, show me another deity to consider who's got a plan for evil, not just concepts of a plan.
You know, if I'm practicing for something, right, I'm practicing because what I'm doing now is going to be what I'm doing later.
You're making my point for me, Ty. I've been in the military for 28 years now. We sweat in training so we won't bleed in battle. We practice enduring stress, sleep deprivation, extreme heat and cold in simulated environments so that when we enter into the real fight, we're prepared for those elements. Likewise, Christians train to overcome sin and evil here by praying and fasting and consecrating ourselves so that when temptation comes, we know how to overcome it. So if we learn how to overcome evil here on earth, it won't be a problem for us to do so in heaven. And only those who love and choose God here will spend eternity with him in heaven. But all those who hate God here and choose to be separated from him here will spend eternity precisely that way.
There's no evil or suffering in heaven, right? So how would us practicing evil and suffering and living with that here, how would that ever be practiced for what we're going to do in heaven? Make that make sense.
You talk fast, but I listen slow. And I never said that we should practice evil here. Precisely the opposite. It is avoiding sin and the temptation to do evil here that prepares us for what we're going to do in heaven. Deconstructionists complain so much about sin, but what are you actually doing about it? Most people don't really hate sin and evil in the world. They hate other people's sin and evil. We whine and complain and scream that we want God to intervene in the world and stop other people's sin and evil, but not our own. God stop them and from raping and murder and harming children, but let me keep lusting and coveting and lying and being unforgiving and gossiping. Intervene and stop their free will, but leave me and my free will and my sin alone. The same way that we complain that God didn't stop somebody else's sin, it's somebody somewhere else in the world wondering why God didn't stop yours.
Make that make sense.